Hi folks, I'm Rich Lucy, your host for Prevention Profiles Take 5, DEA's podcast that focuses on current and emerging issues related to preventing drug use and misuse among college students. I'm very happy to announce that our guest for this episode is Jennifer Jacobsen. Let me tell you a little bit about Jen and then we'll get into our interview. So Jen Jacobsen is Executive Director of Health and Wellness at Macalester College and brings a public health perspective to her nearly 30 years of work in higher education across many different institutions and professional roles. For over a decade, she has collaborated with faculty about low-effort, role-appropriate strategies they can use to support student well-being and, in turn, academic engagement. Jen has co-facilitated several multi-day faculty workshops on this topic at the campus and consortium level, as well as conference sessions at NASPA's Strategies Conference, the Meeting of the Minds Conference, and the American Association of Colleges and Universities Class Conference. She has also led faculty and staff-guided book readings, campus-based presentations, and discussions. Jen is currently pursuing a doctorate in public health with a concentration in implementation science and a focus on college student behavioral health. With that, Jen, welcome to the podcast.
Great. Thank you so much, Rich. It's really nice to be here with you.
It's exciting too, because as we're going to hear during the interview, it's going to be a little bit focused on the faculty area, which we haven't really focused on too much in some of these past podcast episodes. So I'm really happy to do that with you. Before we get into the interview proper, though, why don't you tell us a little bit about Macalester College?
Sure. Macalester is a residential college of about 2,000 students. We're located in St. Paul, Minnesota. That's the capital of Minnesota. We're in the upper Midwest, which means the lilacs have just come into bloom this last week, and we just had our first tornado siren practice of the year about 15 minutes ago. The context of Minnesota is relevant here because Minnesota legalized adult use cannabis in 2023 and THC beverages and edibles the previous year. So that certainly is affecting how we're thinking about things on our campus, along with the dozens of other states that also have state legal cannabis.
Well, thank you for that. So would you say relatively small campus? I mean, 2,000 students?
Yep. We're a small campus and we're about 56% residential. So we navigate both having an on-campus student population and an off-campus population.
All right, great. And thank you for bringing up the lilacs. One of my favorite smells of all time are the lilacs. I think that's awesome. All right, so let's get right into our interview. As I mentioned, you have done a lot of work around faculty member engagement in student health and well-being, including around drug use and misuse. So through all that work that you've done, what do you see as maybe one or two of the biggest challenges to engage faculty members in this space?
Sure. And I won't lean into the obvious answer, which is faculty are busy and have a lot of competing demands. But specifically, when we're thinking about engaging them in student well-being work and prevention work around alcohol and other drugs in particular, is faculty often perceive this as not part of their role. It's not part of their job. They shouldn't be saying anything about it. So number one challenge is, how do we help faculty see places where it is part of their role? The second one is challenges that aren't unique to faculty and specific, but show up in our faculty, is that thinking about alcohol and other drugs are just a rite of passage in college, right? The misperceived norms that everyone's doing it, that they may be engaged with it and they went on to get a PhD and a career in academia, so it must be okay. We in public health, we call that survivor's bias, right? Because our faculty are not the people who struggled with substance use and dropped out of college and couldn't pursue a higher degree. They're the ones who made it through and got that PhD and were successful in a job search. But also, in addition to that, just working with faculty and staff and others who are a couple decades older than our students, even something as environmental as the changes in THC concentration between when they were in college and the THC concentration our students encounter now, it's almost like a completely different drug. And that piece is a really important differentiation. Those challenges both lead into some of the solutions we might talk about today. It is how we help faculty see this part of their role, but that means not leaving them to devise their own tools to talk about it or to get engaged with it. But for those of us who are prevention professionals, to figure out how to engage with them effectively in, as you already mentioned, low effort, role appropriate ways.
So back in the day, and you and I have been in this field for about the same amount of time. I mean, as people know, I retired at the end of January, but 35 plus years in the prevention space. And as I mentioned in your bio, you've got nearly 3 decades of work in the space as well. When I first started in this field with faculty members, I guess I'll call it a buzzword, buzz phrase, was curriculum infusion. That was the idea of incorporating alcohol and other drug topic areas in just about any curriculum. And I worked with folks, and I'm going to guess maybe you were of this mind too. I'm glad you mentioned the challenge of faculty members not seeing it as their role. I mean, I can imagine that would be one of the biggest pushbacks. Or they don't want it to be their role, right? I mean, there's 2 different things there. But with the curriculum infusion piece, are you able to, get with faculty and say, look, there are some really easy ways that you could probably incorporate alcohol and other drug prevention in your already established syllabus so that you wouldn't really have to change too much? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. In my role at Macalester and at my previous institution, the folks actually who were most interested in sort of subversive curricular infusion were our statistics folks. And now here, Macalester has robust work in data science because, right, we had really great sets of survey data, really robust sets of survey data. And one thing we know as higher educational professionals, it's so developmentally appropriate that the thing that our students are most interested in is actually themselves. So if you're wanting to get statistics students really interested in statistics, one way to do it is student health data from their own campus. And certainly we curated that in some specific ways, but really highlighting for the faculty member of where there might be interesting relationships for students to explore, particularly in the substance use areas. We also partner with our colleagues in health psychology. In fact, some of our health promotion staff has met with our health psychology professor as they're proposing different topics students can use, using some survey data to launch that, but having some of our health promotion professionals talk with them about what some topics might be. Because then now you have a whole class of students who didn't opt into thinking about something like the intersection of cannabis and driving, who are all going to see their classmates' final paper, final project that they share with the class. So there's some learning that happens there in general. It might sound really obvious, but not to overlook if you have a psychopharmacology class, that's a great one to collaborate with. But we're increasingly seeing more public health courses at the undergraduate level. And that's a great place to engage with folks thinking curricularly. Right adjacent to curricularly is projects like having an opportunity to offer some of the content for a first year course, or having a session ready to go that's fun and interactive for Don't Cancel That Class for faculty to invite folks in. And then really, right, we have a captive audience of students who maybe didn't opt into some more engagement around alcohol or other drugs. I do love it more when it's a first year course, because then the faculty member is there, because we never forget the faculty member is one of our key audiences when we're doing that session as well.
And I was just about to ask you about Don't Cancel the Class. I'm glad you brought that up, because that was another, but I stifled a chuckle on my end when you used the word subversive, because I have this thought of, prevention professionals covertly going out and secretively, just dropping this content into classes wherever they can. So it's a great opportunity. So as I move on to my next question, as you work And even when you're providing technical assistance to others around the country on this topic, to engage new partners on campus, in the surrounding community, how do you discuss the connection between students' well-being and alcohol and drug use? I've talked about this with others on this podcast. I ask the question because of the concern that people have when you talk well-being, that it's too generic and maybe the alcohol and drug content might get put aside or lost. So how do you discuss that connection with new partners?
Yeah, you're right, Rich. We have to use the language of what's capturing the attention of our campuses now, whether that be our senior leadership, our colleagues, what's going out in our media. Certainly at the height of the COVID pandemic, we heard more about student well-being and mental health than we had heard for some time. And now the language we're hearing a lot is about student success. And especially navigating the headwinds we have currently in higher education, especially as many of us face a demographic cliff of fewer college-bound students coming to our campuses starting this fall, the 18-year lag since the recession of 2008, 2009. Retention becomes even more important for our campuses to be able to function. We can't afford to lose students who we've worked so hard and invested in recruiting here, nor do we want students who've already spent time and capacity and tuition dollars to leave without completing a degree. So that is entryways we think about. But I think about, when folks hear wellness or well-being, you're right, it feels really general. And to use a technical term, it feels squishy to people, right? They're not quite sure what it means. They know it probably intersects with academics and they don't know how. So I, with my collaborators, we're fortunate to have a truly excellent service-oriented institutional research team here at Macalester, especially Adam Johnson. We use our student survey data as a place to start because it can offer a more concrete, measurable relationship between alcohol and other drugs and the student success aspects we're invested in. Here at Macalester, we use the American College Health Association's National College Health Assessment, which has a lot of really robust questions around alcohol and other drugs, including in the last 5 years or so. They've added the risk assist for about the top 6 or 8 most commonly reported used drugs by our students. And so number one, that in and of itself is valuable because it's students reporting out on their own probably unwanted outcomes of use. I failed to do something that was expected of me. I've tried to cut down and I couldn't, those kinds of things. But we use this ACHA and CHA data. I also do this with my professional partner, Andy Tracy, who's an associate dean at Grinnell, is we look at the relationship between alcohol and other drug use and aspects of mental health. Aspects of sleep, we know actually in the data we cannot disaggregate and the relationship between students' GPA, their self-reported health, and their sense of belonging. Belonging is another key word that folks on our campus really are talking about and caring about. But when we look in that NCHA data about whatever campus I would come to anywhere in the United States, the top 4 things that our students will say interfered with their academics where they got a lower grade in a course or delayed their progress towards graduation are stress, anxiety, sleep difficulties, and depression. If you ask them about alcohol and other drugs, only about 1.5% will say alcohol or other drugs negatively impacted my academics, but 20 to 40% will say stress, anxiety, sleep difficulties, and depression. What's really interesting is once you tease that out, students who self-report any past 30-day cannabis use statistically significantly more likely to say stress, anxiety, sleep difficulties, and depression have interfered with their academics are students who self-report 5 drinks in a sitting in the last 2 weeks if they're self-reporting as men, 4 more drinks in a sitting the last 2 weeks if they're self-reporting as women, are more likely to say sleep difficulties and depression have interfered with their academics. Correlation, of course, is not causation, but that lets us know there's really a complex relationship in there, and we probably can't just address the mental health or just address the academics. We have to have the substance use piece in there as part of the conversation. One of our longtime colleagues, Rich, Amelia Aria, University of Maryland, their Center for Young Adult Health and Development in 2013 to 2015, they did some really excellent publications called The Academic Opportunity Cost of Substance Use. And that really showed that students who self-reported heavy cannabis use were about 16% more likely to have to take a semester or more off of school than students who self-reported minimal use. On a lot of our campuses, our graduation rate of a student who has to take a semester or more of leave isn't more than 60%, right? So that's a cause of concern. I've always wished that they would redo the study with cannabis that's at the concentration it is now, because average concentration of THC in cannabis is much higher than when they did that study even in 2013. The other thing too, when I think about other colleagues on campus that may or may not be faculty, is linking substance use to some other risk behaviors we think about. We think about risk of perpetration of interpersonal violence. We think about driving under the influence, whether that be under the influence of alcohol or cannabis. Cannabis use, the last time we looked at it in the NCHA data, like in the national undergraduate data, a student who self-reports any past 30-day cannabis use is 7 times more likely to say they're using someone else's prescription stimulants than someone who's not, right? And that might be a cycle of cannabis use, lower motivation, harder time getting schoolwork done, and then under the false impression that misusing prescription stimulants is going to help them catch up. The other thing too that I think is really interesting, and it's because as a college health professional, a lot of access to parents and families, and hearing year in and year out, parents say, I'd rather my student use cannabis than drink alcohol. And we're seeing a lot of national narratives with the drop in alcohol use in high school students. Does that mean because they're replacing it with cannabis? And Rich, I'll tell you what we saw in the national data is that a student who self-reports any 30-day cannabis use is twice as likely as a student who doesn't to also report past 2-week binge drinking. So it seems to be it's more common that there's a both and than an either or. So again, right, like looking at all of this survey data it's a launching point because correlation's not causation, but certainly what it's doing is bringing the substance use conversation to our other conversations about student success, mental health, belonging, sleep, and our ability to retain our students and retain students who are thriving in our college environment.
A lot to unpack in what you talked about, and I just wrote some really quick notes. First of all, we could take a significant off-ramp on the whole topic of what you just said about this, those who are using cannabis and 7 times likely to be using a prescription stimulant that's not theirs. And so while I'm not an employee of DEA anymore, I still got that hat in the closet and I wear it when I need to. This is the PSA that for prevention professionals, we need to keep reminding people that, do not take any medicine that's not been prescribed for you by a licensed medical provider and dispensed through a trusted pharmacy. And social media is not a trusted pharmacy. I mean, so, PSA given. So I feel like I've done a bit of work here. So 2 things I want to quickly loop back to. Student retention. Boy, if you really want to get the president's attention, bring up the connection between alcohol and drug misuse and student retention. Whether they're dropping out or stopping out, the president of the college, they're going to take heed if you bring up and start to talk dollars and cents of the number of students who are leaving or stopping out because of their drug use or misuse. So student retention, that's a hook for the senior leadership, certainly. I also, another chuckle, you used the word squishy, a really highly technical term, folks, that we use in our field. But I think health and well-being can sometimes be viewed very broadly. And so I think it's important when if people were to say, oh yeah, all right, so you're keeping students healthy. But that can be sliced, in my mind, already 4 different ways. I mean, you're talking mental health, behavioral health, physical health, emotional health, right? So, I mean, it's not just, oh, they're healthy. It's like, but how healthy are they, and in what aspects are they healthy? So it's a lot more nuanced than I think people even realize that you just brought up.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm going to come back to faculty now for a bit. So campusdrugprevention.gov for folks, hopefully you do know what that is, DEA's website for professionals who are working to prevent drug use and misuse among college students. One of the features of the website is called View from the Field. These are guest articles written by folks from all around the country, including yourself. I don't have the exact date, but it was a little over a year ago, I think, when I last looked. You wrote a view from the field for us, and in the article you said, it's critical that your faculty know your campus data so they can be partners in promoting accurate norms and questioning perceived norms. In fact, you lightly touched on that just a little bit ago. So going back to advice, what advice do you have for your peers on educating their campus's faculty members really in 2 areas? One, on the data, but 2, also get to know the prevention resources that are available to students. So yeah, they're not the expert, but they know where to point students to if they need help. So what's your advice to peers on engaging faculty on know your data and know your resources?
Right. Again, I'm going to circle back to that lower effort, role appropriate ways to invite faculty, right? Because we are unlikely beyond a champion or two to get to make this a high priority of faculty. So we need to find ways to meet them where they are. In addition to bringing substance use back to those key areas like mental health, student success, and retention, one of the things we already mentioned is what does it look like when we collaborate with faculty with their coursework, and really presenting it as, hey, I have a cool opportunity for you with this data set that might help enhance your work and academic engagement. You know, we mentioned well-being being squishy and diffuse, and I like to think even if our faculty didn't care about student well-being, and we know by and large, of course, they do care about academic engagement. And when students have more well-being, they're more likely to show up for class, participate in class, all of the things that actually makes a faculty job more rewarding. Other ways I think about it is what can we do to make it easy for faculty to include resources around prevention or early intervention for substance use on their syllabus. A lot of times, right, they're putting Title IX and academic resources and counseling resources on in their syllabus, and sometimes there's a centralized place on campus where they can grab that from. What would it look like if we're normalizing some of our, hey, you can refer yourself to a brief alcohol screening intervention for college students, or if you have an online, right, like e-checkup to go, whatever you have, what does it look like to include those in the syllabus statements? I also think about ways we work to institutionalize this to lower the lift. So on many of our campuses, our faculty have to perform service on campus. Can you make whatever alcohol and other drug committee you have on campus a faculty appointed committee? So actually that's counted as part of their service towards promotion and tenure. It's been really fun to do that and have faculty who are familiar sort of with this field because they're psychology faculty. And it's really fun when you get like a music professor who's like, this is brand new information and I hadn't thought of it. Both those angles have been really good. We try really hard to use existing structures such as centers for teaching and learning often have like a faculty workshop series that's often a workshop and discussion. I was just with my collaborator, Andy, down at Grinnell last Friday, and it's a community Friday, and we said we'd show 4 student data points about the intersection of academics and well-being, and one of those was about cannabis, and certainly it generated some of the most discussion at the tables because our faculty hadn't been asked to think about that as part of academic success before. I also think about considering places where faculty are uncertain. None of us like navigating uncertainty, and two places where this shows up is faculty who travel with students, either if it's course embedded travel or if it's a faculty member taking a couple of high achieving students to a conference to present. Faculty are often unclear expectations from the institution around alcohol and other drugs when travel. And if your campus is like anything like the ones I've worked with, sometimes there's up to 9 different travel policies depending on under what office that student is traveling with, whether it is athletics or an alternative break trip or alumni travel or that, of what expectations are around alcohol and other drugs. That's a place where faculty really get interested in having that conversation about what that looks like, but also talking to them about gatherings in their home. I've worked at small colleges where it's typical you might invite a seminar over to your home, or you might have a backyard event for the graduating seniors in a major. And actually, that's a place where we talk about what does it look like to not norm that everyone there would drink alcohol? What does it look like to offer interesting alternatives? What does it look like to card the students who are coming to your backyard party with a keg, right? So that we are setting an expectation that that's something that happens. One of the most interesting things I learned from a workshop from the Iowa Department of Public Health was when we're thinking about our data and norms, the opportunity to help engage and actually, I mean, right? Like if you can't be a good example, I guess you're going to be a horrible warning, but like if you're not going to promote accurate norms, at least like if we could get people to stop promoting inaccurate norms, that would be a step. I think about Iowa Department of Public Health talks about a bite, snack, or meal approach. So when I talked a minute ago about those workshops through Centers for Teaching and Learning or Teaching and Scholarship, those are meals, right? We're sitting down for 45 or 50 minutes and really engaging with data, looking at substance use and student success and well-being in a varieties of ways. But how do we offer snacks? So if people know if they invite me to something and I have like 10 or 15 minutes, whether it's working with our resident assistants or our student affairs division or sometimes in a faculty space, I might do a pub quiz with our student survey data and have them talk at tables to guess at the answers for any number of well-being questions, but specifically always questions about alcohol and other drugs. And, and the skill in that is in the debrief of each question, but actually the more off base they are with a question, the greater the opportunity for learning, because they're so surprised by, I thought many more than just 33% of our students used cannabis in the last month. I thought that with everything we're hearing about opioids, I thought it would be way more than less than 1% of our students self-reporting using opioids, and using that as an opportunity to do some norms correction. But even as simple, and boy, I did this because a student asked me to get like a spinning wheel that makes the loud clicks. And I thought that was the silliest thing. And anytime we offer it and do it, people come to our tables. And it's really interesting. So we call it the Wheel of Norms, and often it has a lot of survey data on it. And you get a prize whether you're right or wrong, because learning's the real reward, and we want people to get engaged. But when we have that out early in the school year, and especially an opportunity to engage our first year students, the first year adult use cannabis was legalized in Minnesota. One of our questions is, now that adult use cannabis is legal in Minnesota, you can use it on campus. And our students who walked by got 100% correct rate that no, you could not, because we accept federal funding, right? And the Drug Free Schools and Campuses Act exists. Our faculty had a 50% success rate, right? And so it was a learning moment for us that our students aren't our only audience in educating about that. But if our faculty are getting it wrong, like with well intentions, what are they saying in other spaces? We're piloting this year. It seemed like a big ask for health promotion and I to get into present at a department chairs meeting. But our chair of the faculty, whom I adore, said we could actually give them a slide that will be up when people are walking into the meeting each month that then can be sent out to, they'll send it out all to their department. So we're going to do with one data piece and one action a faculty member could take, right? So we're super excited about that, but really engaging our faculty, another barrier to them thinking this isn't their business is they think we're asking them to be judgmental. We're actually just asking them to be partners in the data literacy development of our students. And some of that is knowing the accurate norms because again, listeners here, right? They might have all experienced that well-intended faculty member on a weekend of a big campus event with lots of tradition might say, hey, I know you're all going to go drink this weekend, or it's a spring event, right? I know 420 is coming up and you're all going to use cannabis. Aside from the fact when we think about belonging, how that makes so many people who choose not to use feel like they don't belong, it's actually just factually incorrect. On a given weekend, most of our students aren't using a substance.
Jen, thanks for that advice, especially for peers. And that's what I really hope to achieve with these podcasts is, takeaways. It really is, what's the practical information that people can take back to their campus and their communities. My next question, it's another, advice and guidance, if you will. So at national conferences, I know that, and we've been at some of these same national conferences, you have presented sessions on using science to guide strategic planning for prevention. Yay, woohoo! So we need to be doing that all the time. In the prevention field, we know, especially on college and university campuses, there's a relatively high turnover of staff. So what guidance do you have for our viewers who might be new in their role on this very important part of strategic planning?
Yeah, so when I think about it, if you are new in your role, the really, you mentioned, like thinking practically, the real practical advice I have is to dream small and start thinking about, right? I don't have to get every faculty member on board. Where's the one faculty member I can start with who has a shared interest that I can invite out to coffee, or whatever comforting beverage of the day, and to think about, how do I start building something through personal connections? Because none of us are going to start out and get an audience at a all faculty meeting. And actually, that's probably not where we're going to do our best work. But I think really it's something I wish I had thought more about as a new professional in this field is considering how you're going to institutionalize the work, how you're going to embed it so that it's not just up to you and your energy, but it becomes part of the life of how the college works. And that includes, right, faculty and staff handbooks. And really, if you get a chance to meet with your dean and you start bringing up questions about those travel policies or alcohol or other drugs in the home policies and stuff, sometimes they quickly realize there is a gap in their handbook. And then you're a content expert who can work with that. We're in the process right now, like many folks in student affairs, of revising our student handbooks. And we're doing some of the same work in there about how do we make sure it's reflecting what we're doing. But also, how do we make sure that we are a regular part of not only our student orientation, our faculty orientation, and as I mentioned, those faculty appointed committees that people in who attend the workshops for our centers of teaching and learning expect us to show up every year. But the message I have for today and this year, it is 2026. So folks may know it's a biennial review year for the Drug-Free Schools and Communities Act. And if you are a new professional and you feel overwhelmed by that, I really encourage you. The Illinois Higher Education Center, Eric Davidson over there at EIU, has a bunch of the resources that will help support you in that. But this means we are at the time where we are reflecting back on our 2024-2025 and our 2025-2026 academic years. And sure, there's a lot of statistical reporting about incidents and there's policy reporting, but this is where actually no one should be writing the biennial review alone in their office. This is a time right? And an opportunity to leverage collaborative opportunities to come and talk together if you haven't been making this part of an alcohol and other drug committee about, let's really think about the last 2 years. What were successes? What do we need to adapt? What do we need to iteratively improve, do better? Where are there gaps? And you're setting a course for the next 2 academic years. And this is a place where you can institutionalize some of the recommendations for future work, because your biennial review needs to be publicly available on your website. And it really should go to your senior leadership team, and your president should be taking a look at it and signing off on it. So, Rich, as you mentioned, retention is what helps get the attention of your president, as well as other things, right? Student thriving, mitigating risk, that academic success in all of the ways. But really, if I could give one recommendation to younger folks right now, right? And we're never more than 23 months away from a biennial review, since they come up every 2 years. But that is a great opportunity to institutionalize that work, both in the development of the biennial review and then the life you give it. So it's not just sitting dormant on your website for the next 2 years.
So I am going to shamelessly steal a little soundbite you said, with attribution, of course. I love that you said dream small. Channel our friend and colleague, Joan Masters, who I've talked with about this pretty substantively, when she talks about incremental steps in doing this work. Because, yeah, it can feel overwhelming. And it can feel like, as my former supervisor here used to say, drinking from a fire hose. I mean, it's like, so like, I'm responsible for everything. And for some of you out there on your campuses, we see you and we hear you. We know that you are, oftentimes it feels like you're on an island, that you are doing this stuff by yourself. But I like that idea of dream small, because then you can take a breath, that you don't have to feel like you have to do. I mean, there's a place for think audaciously and be audacious. There's a place for that, but I do like let's pump the brakes a little bit and just pull back and just dream small. And so now when I'm doing presentations or speeches, I will obviously attribute this to you, Jen. I love that, because I have little sound bites I now have from you, from Joan, our friend Jason Kilmer. I mean, I name drop all the time. So it's like, I just think it's a great thing. And I do think that that's really good advice for folks. As we wind up, I always end the interviews with this question, and it's you've had the mic, but I really give you the mic. It's, what advice do you have, just even generally, for the professionals who are working to prevent drug use among college students, as well as the students themselves? We know they watch this podcast. Since we've talked about faculty members, I want to also put a pitch out there. I've learned about this over the last year at both on podcasts and at presentations I've done. There are faculty members out there who are in this space, or as I say, adjacent, they're prevention adjacent. The podcast has become required viewing for their students, and they'll assign a podcast. The students have to watch it, and then it's either write a paper, a very small, short paper, or it's like a book club. They talk about it at the next class. So I find that fascinating that faculty members are using this podcast in that way. So we know that students are watching this. What advice do you have for your peers and for the students who are in this prevention space?
Yeah, what a great question, Rich. And I'm gonna think about advice that is thinking about both those audiences, and it's gonna play out in slightly different ways. I'm trained in brief alcohol screening and intervention for college students, which means I'm familiar with. I sit and meet with students using a way of having a conversation called motivational interviewing. And motivational interviewing is a non-judgmental conversation, often used in situations thinking about substance use, but other behavior areas as well, where you are helping the person in front of you explore any gaps between their goals and values and the current state of what is, or the current state of their behavior and choices, right? So we can imagine with students, it's thinking about what you mentioned before, right? Finding the hook. What is the hook for a student where they are in a state of ambivalence because the choices they're making, say around substance use, aren't in alignment with their goals and values for their time at college? You don't have to wait until you're in a basics conversation to think about that if you are a student, right? What are your goals and values for your time in college, right? And that might be your career values, you might be a student athlete, you might have family values that really resonate with you. But to think and start from a place with those goals and values, and then consider how substance use fits into that and where it does and in what ways it does. Instead of going the other way around and waiting until you're presented for an opportunity with substance use to then in that moment have to think about that, right? But that's really important for our professionals too, is when you're thinking about getting the interest, collaborating with, this topic has been today about faculty in specific, but other campus partners. What are the motivators for them? What is the hook for them to come engage in the substance use conversation? It's almost never substance use. It is thinking about student well-being or mental health, success, retention, lower risk for students, for themselves, for other people. So thinking about when we think about a campus partner we want to engage with or want to engage more, starting from the place, what's the hook for them that is actually personally relevant or professionally relevant for them to work with us. But lastly, this work can feel lonely. There's times when it feels like we're not seeing success or it doesn't feel high in our college priority list. But I also really think about, like, we need to find what gives us hope and celebrate the small wins. I think about when you're at an institution for a couple years and you get to do that second and then that third student health survey, and you see a trend either, I think in this current climate, the fact that we're holding cannabis use steady is a success. But when we see the drop in students self-reported, they're self-reporting fewer unwanted consequences from their alcohol use, from other drug use. That feels like a win. Small changes in data, the average number of drinks. We can hear the shifts in conversations. We hear when our students and when our staff and colleagues start using the language of if you choose to use instead of saying when you drink, when you smoke. Um, and again, celebrating, those dreams small, then celebrate those small wins. We had a fantastic collaboration with three of our students 2 years ago here now on our campus here at Macalester. We have Narcan in the AEDs in our residence halls, and our students said, well, we need Narcan in more places. So we said, okay, health promotion team will make it available for you at no cost through their anonymous post office requests, along with things like condoms, KN95 masks. And students said, that's great, but sometimes, like, you're going out on a Friday night, you're going into the community, it feels like it would be good to have it on you now. So our students helped us brainstorm. There is a single place on campus where all of our students have ID card access 24/7, and that is the vestibule of our library. And I don't know if folks know, but if you work in public health, you probably do. Librarians are some of your best public health partners. At the height of COVID, they were the ones who stocked tests and masks and things right at the front desk, right? They think about public health. So we approached them and they said, of course, you could put a cabinet in our vestibule. So now we're celebrating our second academic year of having that harm reduction cabinet with any number of supplies in it, right? We have condoms and other things, but also having that Narcan available. And that felt really successful as a student collaboration that helped meet a need in a way that's proportional to the risk on our campus. We don't need it everywhere, but we need it someplace that students can get to it 24/7. And a collaboration amongst our library, our senior leadership signed off on it. So now that it's been norm, that it's just part of what we do, we still have to remember that was a process and that was a win.
That's a great example, and I want to reiterate, I hope our viewers picked up on it, kind of in the same line of dream small, celebrate the small wins. These do not have to be huge. I remember a time we were sitting in some meeting, previous agency, talking about, the challenges in prevention with, how do you demonstrate success when you're trying to prevent something you don't see. And I said, well, I think that's part of the issue right there. Every day that that goes by where there was not a sexual assault, where there was not a fight, where there was not a death, there was not someone dropping or stopping out of school related to alcohol and other drugs, we did our work. So that is a success, so we need to celebrate that. And I like the way that you said that, celebrate small wins, because I think in our work, we're trying to change norms, which takes a long time. And if you're waiting for the big wins, you might be waiting a while, right? So I think I like that idea to, identify the small wins and celebrate those. Jen, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I knew when I was recruiting you to do this, and with the topic areas, it's not, faculty members is not an area that we've really touched on in depth much, and I'm just glad that we've had you to bring to the table virtually to talk about this. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's delightful to be in the same prevention space with you again, Rich.
Oh, thank you so much. And on a side note, the fur babies. So anybody, if I'm connected to you on social media, I know, Jen, you've got a couple, I've got one. If I see people with fur babies, we're a connection right then and there. So
I'm a big fan of Jackpot.
Yep, Jackpot, yep, our cat, yep, he's out there sometimes going viral. But that's how I say, people, it started for me in the pandemic. We saw people at home and in their meetings. I saw so many four-legged meeting participants. I used to call Jackpot my co-presenter so many times because you'd see him behind me. But it's just another way to make connections with people. And it's just, one way I see I have a connection with you, and I love it. Jen, thanks again so much for being on the podcast. And to our viewers, thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate you watching this episode of Prevention Profiles Take 5. And I want to remind you, you can watch all of the previous episodes of this series on campusdrugprevention.gov. It's in the resources tab, so please check it out. With that, have a great day.